One day in Bangkok, Frank Lucas watched a carpenter build furniture with false bottoms. He would later tell the world he smuggled heroin home in soldiers' coffins, and Hollywood would spend $100 million filming that story. But that carpenter was not building coffins, he was building furniture, and the operation Lucas spent 40 years claiming as his own belonged to the man standing next to him. Lucas did not run that pipeline. He was a customer. The real mastermind was an Army master sergeant. The movie reduced to Frank's errand boy, a man who spent the rest of his life calling the coffin story a lie. The judge who prosecuted Lucas called him illiterate, vicious, and violent. Everything Denzel Washington was not. 5 years before Frank Lucas ever set foot in Bangkok, Leslie Ike Atkinson was already shipping heroin through military channels. What Atkinson built was not some back alley operation. The DEA considered his network so sophisticated that they created a special task force just to track him. They called it Centak 9. It operated across 3 continents for 3 years, following evidence from Bangkok to American military bases scattered across the Pacific and back home. By the time they were done, they had documented one of the largest military-channeled heroin pipelines in American history, run for years out of Bangkok through U.S. bases on the eastern seaboard. The man behind it was born in Goldsboro, North Carolina in 1925. He enlisted in the Army during World War II, served through Korea, and rose to the rank of Master Sergeant. He knew exactly how the military postal system worked, who could be bribed at every checkpoint, and which customs protocols had gaps wide enough to move serious weight. I would argue that is what a mastermind looks like, not a guy giving magazine interviews about his chinchilla coat and claiming to make $1 million a day, while federal agents documented he had less than $600,000 to his name. The real method was teak furniture with hidden compartments. Atkinson had carpenters in Bangkok build bedroom sets, desks, and cabinets with false bottoms designed to evade X-ray machines and physical inspection. The furniture shipped through military freight because Atkinson had inside men at every step of the supply chain. Nobody was opening crates of furniture addressed to a sergeant's family back home. The paperwork looked routine, the shipments looked routine. Everything about it was designed to disappear into the ordinary flow of military logistics. The largest single seizure came from a teakwood bedroom set bound for Fort Benning, Georgia. Inside it, an Army inspector found 100 pounds of heroin packed into the furniture's hollow spaces. That single interception represented millions of dollars in street value and proved the furniture method worked exactly as designed. Not 1 gram was ever found in a coffin, despite every tip the government chased, despite every body they searched. The coffin story was a myth from the start. The movie does put Ike on screen. It just calls him Nate, played by Roger Genver Smith, and makes him Frank's cousin and errand boy instead of the man who built the pipeline. But the coffin imagery didn't even originate with Lucas. In December of 1972, UPI ran a sensational report about heroin possibly being smuggled inside soldier coffins returning from Vietnam. Authorities searched a military flight based on an unreliable tip. They examined 2 bodies on board. They found nothing. The bodies had been sitting unguarded in a Honolulu hangar for 16 hours, and one showed a recent incision and stitching that sparked speculation among investigators. But the speculation proved baseless. No drugs in coffins, no evidence, just headlines that would not die. Prosecutor Michael Marr described multi-kilo amounts of heroin, most frequently placed within the bodies of dead Vietnam veterans, during his public statements. The claim was striking. It was also completely unsupported by physical evidence. Lucas read those headlines and grafted them onto his own story. By the time he was giving interviews decades later, he had convinced himself and everyone listening that he had invented the whole operation. The movie turned his fabrication into cinema. $269 million at the box office for a myth Lucas built himself and never stopped telling. The film also got his relationship with Bumpy Johnson completely wrong. In American Gangster, Lucas is Bumpy's driver and protege for years. He is there when Bumpy dies, holding him in his arms in an appliance store, while the old man gasps his last words. It is a beautiful scene. Denzel Washington sells the grief perfectly. It is also complete fiction. Bumpy Johnson was released from Alcatraz on parole in 1963 after serving 9 years. He died of a heart attack on July 7, 1968, at Wells Restaurant in Harlem. That is a 5-year window. Lucas claimed to be his driver and right-hand man for 15 years. The math simply does not work. You cannot spend 15 years working for a man who is only free for 5. Worse, Bumpy's widow, Mamie Johnson, went on record calling Lucas a liar. She told interviewers he was a mere flunky, someone Johnson might have allowed to carry his coat. She said he may have driven Bumpy a few times at most, and that he was never invited inside their home. When Lucas claimed Bumpy died in his arms, Mamie was furious. She said her husband died at Wells Restaurant, surrounded by friends, in the arms of his childhood companion, Junie Bird. Frank Lucas was nowhere around. All of his talk is lies. According to Mamie, much of what Lucas claimed as his own story actually belonged to another young hustler named Flash Walker, who lived with the Johnsons and later betrayed them. Lucas apparently picked up Walker's narrative along with Atkinson's smuggling method and called it all his own. That takes a certain kind of audacity. I think there is something almost admirable about a man who can look at two different people's life stories and decide both of them now belong to him. And you have to admire the confidence, even while you note the complete lack of originality. Even his rival called him out in the press. Nicky Barnes, the man who actually dominated Harlem's heroin trade in the 1970s and inspired his own documentary called Mr. Untouchable, told reporters flat out, "I always got my drugs from the Italians, not from Lucas, not from his supposed Asian connection." Barnes said the confrontation scene in the movie where Lucas yells at him for using the Blue Magic brand name never happened. The film invented drama between two men who apparently had no relationship worth dramatizing. The Blue Magic purity claims were exaggerated for effect as well. The film suggests Lucas sold heroin that was almost 100% pure, undercutting everyone else in the market with a product so clean it killed the competition. In reality, Lucas admitted during later interviews that he cut his product with mannite and quinine. Before selling it, his street-level product was around 10% pure, better than competitors who sold at 3 to 5% purity, but nowhere near the movie's version of the story. Then there is the money question. Lucas claimed he was making $1 million a day and had $52 million in assets at his peak. When the DEA and the NYPD raided his Teaneck home in January of 1975, they seized $584,683. That is a significant haul. It is not $52 million. Lucas explained the gap by claiming officers stole $11 million during the raid and documented only 5% of what they found. A convenient story with no evidence beyond his own word, which we have already established was worth very little. I believe this is the moment where any reasonable person should have stopped taking Lucas at his word, but the journalists kept coming back for more quotes, and the movie executives kept writing checks. What happened to both men after the arrests is the part the movie skipped entirely. The prosecution split Lucas and Atkinson into separate federal cases, but both men went down around the same time. Subscribe. I cover a mob story like this one every week. Atkinson was arrested on January 19, 1975, in Goldsboro, North Carolina, while on military leave. They identified him by a palm print on one of the heroin packaging bags recovered during the investigation. No informant testimony was needed, no wiretap confession, just physical evidence from his own operation that he could not explain away. He was convicted in 1976 and sentenced to 31 years in federal prison. He served every one of them. Lucas was arrested the same month in Teaneck, New Jersey, by DEA Group 22 and NYPD detectives working together. His sentence was 70 years, 40 federal years, plus 30 state years to run consecutively. The kind of time that means you die inside. But Lucas did something Atkinson never did. He talked. Lucas became an informant. He provided information that led to 100 drug-related convictions across multiple jurisdictions. His cooperation got his 70-year sentence reduced to time served after just 5 years. He entered the Federal Witness Protection Program, claimed publicly that he only snitched on corrupt cops who deserved it, and spent the rest of his life denying he had ever been a rat in the traditional sense. Richie Roberts, the prosecutor who later became Lucas's defense attorney after leaving government service, contradicted the reformed informant narrative. If Frank did not do what he did, talk about people that he talked about, there would have been a lot more people out there overdosing. Lucas snitched on everyone who could help reduce his sentence. He just lied about it afterward, which I would say tracks with everything else about the man. The real investigators on the Lucas case, detectives Eddie Jones, Al Spearman, and Benny Abruzzo, who called themselves the Z Team, complained that Roberts received credit in the film for their work. Jones told reporters, "The movie shows him as the detective who was on the street and who was responsible for getting Lucas. That's wrong. That was us. We spent nearly 2 years risking our lives on that case, and then we see a guy who had no interest before we made the arrests take the credit. We're angry." Crime historian Ron Chapisiuk, who wrote books on both Lucas and Atkinson after years of research, called Roberts a minor figure in the Lucas investigation. The film turned him into Russell Crowe's heroic lead, the principled investigator who brings down the kingpin through sheer determination and moral clarity. That version made for better cinema than three guys working a case for 2 years while a prosecutor handled paperwork. Even Roberts acknowledged the investigators deserved recognition, telling interviewers these three cops were assigned primarily to this case. They worked their butts off, and I said they needed a credit in the movie. They did not get one. Even former DEA agents sued Universal Pictures over the movie's inaccuracies. Agents Jack Toll, Gregory Korniloff, and Luis Diaz filed a defamation lawsuit arguing the film misrepresented their work and the actual investigation. The judge dismissed it, but she noted in her ruling that the end credits claim about Lucas's cooperation leading to DEA arrests was wholly inaccurate. The myth had legal protection, the truth did not. Lucas's story of personal redemption fell apart twice after his release from witness protection. In 1984, he was caught trying to exchange 1 ounce of heroin and $13,000 in cash for a kilogram of cocaine. He went back to prison for 7 more years. The reformed gangster had not actually reformed. Then in 2012, at 82 years old, Lucas pleaded guilty to cashing a $17,000 federal disability check twice, a disability check fraud at 82. The criminal ambition had scaled down considerably, but never actually stopped. His wife, Julie Ferrate, was convicted in both the original 1970s case and again in 2010 for cocaine trafficking in Puerto Rico. The whole family stayed in the business long after the movie made them look like they had walked away from crime and found redemption together. And then there is the cruelest irony the screenwriters could never have invented. Ike Atkinson was released from federal prison in 2007 after serving his full 31-year sentence. The same year, American Gangster premiered at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. Reverend Al Sharpton, Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, Cuba Gooding Jr., and director Ridley Scott walked the red carpet. Atkinson spent 31 years in a cell, while Frank Lucas spent 31 years building a legend around his operation. When Atkinson finally got out, he spent his remaining years waging what one journalist called an academic war on Frank Lucas. He challenged Lucas to public debates about who really ran the Bangkok pipeline. Lucas declined every invitation. Atkinson gave interviews to anyone who would listen, cooperated with crime historian Ron Chapasiuk on a book called Sergeant Smack, and tried to set the historical record straight. Atkinson told reporters, "Nobody in my organization had anything to do with coffins. We were shipping drugs, but not in that way." He called the coffin story the big lie, the biggest hoax ever perpetuated. He said Lucas had stolen his story for personal gain and watched Hollywood make it permanent. I'd say the cruelest part is that Atkinson had the receipts. The DEA had Centac 9 documentation, the palm prints on the heroin bags, the furniture seizures, and the 31 years of prison time that proved the government considered him the real architect of the pipeline. But none of that mattered because Lucas had Denzel Washington playing him as a thoughtful businessman, while Atkinson sat in prison with no movie deal. The judge who actually prosecuted Lucas, Sterling Johnson Jr., called the film 1% reality and 99% Hollywood. He said the real Lucas was illiterate, vicious, violent, and everything Denzel Washington was not. Johnson later became a federal judge on the Eastern District of New York. He had no incentive to lie about a case from his prosecutor days. He just wanted people to know what they were really celebrating when they bought tickets. Lucas died on May 30th, 2019, in Cedar Grove, New Jersey, at age 88. He died famous. He died wealthy from the movie rights. He died having convinced most of the public that his version of events was accurate. Atkinson died on November 11th, 2014, in Goldsboro, North Carolina, at age 88. He died without the Hollywood glory. He died without the movie money. But he died with the DEA records on his side, and the historical truth slowly catching up to the myth. I think the last detail that matters most is Lucas's origin story. He claimed that watching the Ku Klux Klan murder his 12-year-old cousin in front of him drove him to a life of crime. It was the emotional foundation of his entire public narrative. Ron Chapasiuk's exhaustive research found no evidence that Frank had a cousin murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. Even his tragedy was borrowed from somewhere else. Even his pain was someone else's story he told better. American Gangster made $269 million worldwide by selling a myth. It became the 19th highest grossing film of 2007. It received 2 Academy Award nominations, including one for Ruby Dee as Lucas's mother. The man who actually built the Asian heroin connection, who served 31 years for it, who watched from prison while Hollywood gave his life's work to someone else, was not invited to the premiere. Atkinson built the operation. Lucas built the story. One man served 3 decades in prison. The other got a biopic. A lie told confidently enough for long enough stops being a lie and becomes the record. Subscribe if you want more stories where the movie is the cover and the real crime is who got the credit. I will see you next week